Hello everybody, and welcome to Flight Past. Today we're going to be looking at, this is a section of videos on D-Day, and we're going to begin with Operation Tonga, and we'll talk about this as we get going. I thought I'd start the whole video based in North London, and I'm going to take off here and I'm going to show you some of the key locations that were the headquarters of all the different elements of the Allied forces. So if that's okay, let's just so we are talking time-wise, we're about January 1944, and we're at RAF Norfolk at the moment. So as I say, this is part 1, and Operation Tonga is the beast. Okay, so we're going to do this in parts, and we'll just fly off now. I'm in a Cessna 172. And we're at the end of runway 25 at Norfolk. So let's get going. My full power, brakes off. Airspeed is active, and there we go, just pull off. Bring the flaps up. Okay, and then we've engaged the autopilot there. We should be on heading, so let's just move this heading back to our course. And just reduce this speed a bit. We're not going too high, we're going to go to about 1,000 feet. There we go. Just get used to these controls. So this is RAF Norfolk, and the reason why I began here is because this air base is one of the closest, or it is the closest airfield to the West End of London, and this was used primarily during World War II for all the commanders to fly backwards and forwards, and they would come into this airfield here. It's used today. You'll remember that when the Queen died, she was brought down from Scotland and landed here. Princess Diana was brought here. It's a very short trip to central London. So a lot of the commanders, Eisenhower, Bradley, Churchill, all these people will fly into here, and then they could go off to the different headquarters in London. US Air Force headquarters, which I'm not going to see today, is in High Wycombe in that direction. But what we are going to do is fly up towards North London. and we will be visiting the headquarters of Fighter Command. And the RAF headquarters just had the 2nd Tactical Air Force based here, and there was lots of planning going on for operations. During the Normandy campaign. So Bradley, for example, and Monty used to come back and discuss with Downing and all these other people the bombing situation. And this is it. This is Bentley Priory, and you can see a couple of a Spitfire and a Hurricane outside the building. Unfortunately, it hasn't been modelled here on Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think you can remember quite a famous photos of the leaders outside here at Bentley Priory. This is North London. And then we were going to fly back into central London. So that was so I'm just giving you an idea of the sort of proximity of all these headquarters. They're all on the northwestern side of London. Presumably it means that any bombers have to come across a air defence from the southeast. And we're now heading into central London. You should be able to see Wembley Stadium over here. So what we're going to be talking about today is Operation Tonga, and I'm just giving you a heads up of where these sort of places are that we'll be talking a little bit about during planning and stuff like that. Operation Tonga was the name given to the British airborne operation on D-Day, and it was basically the idea was that paratroop elements and glider-borne troops would secure the eastern edge of the invasion sector. This was to capture bridges, eliminate artillery batteries, and secure a beachhead across the River Orme, and we'll see that when we get to some to France later. It was initially designed to be a defensive move. defensive mode. Seize these bridges, protect the beaches until they could get it established, and then use those bridgeheads over the Orne as a stepping off point for an offensive action. Currently flying here over Regent's Park. You can see London Zoo there, the US Embassy. We've got Hyde Park over here and with the Serpentine. And we're getting into the what I would say is the government district of the UK government. Whitehall. The first building I want to show is this one here. This is the Admiralty. So when we're talking about D-Day, we're talking about Admiral Bertram Ramsay. And a lot of Operation Neptune, which was the seaborne operation, was organised and conducted from this building here. You can tell it's the senior service of the British Armed Forces. We've got Nelson's Column here. The Queen lives down that road there. And this is Horse Guards Parade. We've got here is Downing Street. So the Prime Minister, number 10 Downing Street, is this building right here. Probably recognize the door if I can get this thing to work. Number 10. So that's the Admiralty. So when we talk about the Admiralty, this is the building. Obviously we've got Downing Street here. This is the Foreign Office, and the Cabinet War Rooms are, I believe, on this corner of this building here. So, and we have Parliament and all that normal stuff. And the last place I want to talk about on this flight, this part, is this building up here on the curve of the river in Hammersmith. And this building here, right in the centre, is St. Paul's School. And St. Paul's School was basically Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's school. It got evacuated during the Blitz. School moved out into the west, and when Bernard Montgomery becomes the commander of 21st Army Group, he takes over his old school as his headquarters. So Eisenhower was Supreme Leader, SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. They were actually headquartered over in High Wycombe to begin with, and then they moved down to Portsmouth. But so Monty was here. This is where the initial ideas of D-Day came about. And this is where Monty gave his chats to the supreme leaders. He had So we're just going to head back now to Norfolk, and we'll end this part. We'll take any questions. That St. Paul's School was where Monty had a plan. The plan involved getting to Paris by D-Day plus 90. And we'll talk about this obviously when we get into the actual campaign a lot. Monty got a lot of criticism for the especially from the Americans during the Normandy campaign, because of the progress that the British weren't making, or perceived not to be making, on the eastern end. But when you look at his plan, it always was that the British Army would be the hinge of the door that Bradley and subsequently Patton would kick down the door. And yes, they were behind schedule. Probably initially, a lot of it was to do to the weather. But by the end of the Normandy campaign, off the top of my head, I think Paris actually was liberated on D-Day plus 63. We'll talk all about that when we get. The point for this Operation Tonga is that the seeds have been planted for the plan. The plan has grown from a 3-division to a 5-division front. We've 2 airborne, 2 airborne divisions on the US on the western side flank, and 1 division on the right flank. Right, let's. Let's land this baby. What I'm going to try to do during these talks is to try to keep it real time, really, and a little bit chatty. So if you've got any questions, then please just fire away. As I said in my introduction videos, I'm not I'm an amateur historian and an amateur pilot, so please shout out if you've got any other information you think we can share with people. I'm going to try and keep everything real time. I've really overshot this. And hopefully we'll just have a we'll get I won't miss too much out. So with Monty, he's Monty and Eisenhower have decided that they're not going to concentrate so much on a southern France landing. They'll move the resources from the south of France to Normandy. It delays the landings. They were planned for May, but they push it back to June to bring round landing boats and all the resources. And of course, but this allows them to increase the number of divisions from 3 to 5. So this is a very long landing. Woo. And there we are. So Monty has sent out, told all his commanders what the plan's going to be, and he's sending off instructions to his people of what he wants doing. And in the next part, I'm going to talk about the 6th Airborne Division, and then the actual proper sort of formation of the Operation Tonga plan. So, see you in part 2. Okay, so welcome to part 2 on this video of Operation Tonga. And what we're going to do now is fly over to I'm going to move over this first of all to a place called Lechdale. Now we need to find RAF Fairford, which I believe is here. So we're going to set that as a departure, and then we're going to fly pretty much south to Bryce North, not Bryce Northern, not that one, this one, Boscombe Down. We'll go to Boscombe Down, but we're gonna go via Lechdale, and we will also go via this place here and this place here, which is Bulford. Okay, let's start that flight. So Monty's come along and he's told everybody what he wants us to do. We're now on to the 6th Airborne Division, and we're talking about a guy called Windy Gale. Now let me find Windy. This is Windy. Now Windy Gale is commander of the 6th Airborne Division, and if I can get things, if I can remember, he is a bit of a he's a bit of a legend. He served in both wars, and yeah, so he became the first parachute brigade of the 6th Airborne Division commander. And what I'm trying to say is that he basically organises a series of exercises in February, March of 1944. And he wants to basically test his the mettle of his troops and to allocate units to different missions. And what we're going to be concentrating on in this series of talks is the capture of the bridges at Benouville and Ranville, and these are known as the Canal Bridge and the River Orme Bridge, which are now known as Pegasus Bridge and Horsa Bridge. Let's get up in the air and let's go and have a look at this place. I think I've got everything. Full power. Airspeed is live. Looking for about 50. There we go. Pull up. Flaps up. Just see if this will work now. We will need a heading. Let's capture the GPS, so that's good.
Uniform Oscar 2717. Continue for west departure. Fairford Tower, FLP Zulu Uniform Oscar 2717. Continue for west departure.
Let's make there we go. So this is RAF Fairford, but what we're looking at here is the location of what's known as Operation Bizz. Operation Bizz was occurred in February and March 1944. And it was used by Windy to basically assess his troops. And what we have at Lechdale is a series, as you can see here, of bridges across. This is the River Thames, by the way, this river here, and this is Lechdale. So we've got two bridges, and what we do notice is the distance between these two bridges are pretty similar to the distances between the Cairn Canal Bridge on the left there and say the River Orme Bridge here. Now, I believe that this is where they practiced their mission, and this is when we first talk about Major John Howard and D Company of the 2nd Battalion of the Ox and Bucks Light Infantry. And they were tasked to take these bridges in this exercise of Operation Bizz. It may possibly be that they might. I'm not sure about these lakes and whether they were there in 1944, but it is possible that they might have used some of these narrow strips if it was here at that time. I'm gonna have to get rid of that ATC.
FLP Zulu Uniform Oscar 2717. Radar contact 4 miles north of Echo Golf Uniform Golf, 1800. QNH
Can't get it.
101 tree.
Come on.
Roger. FLP Zulu Uniform Oscar 2717.
Just go to. There we go. Let's just keep it quiet. One thing I don't understand why that is always on. I can't turn it off. So this is Lechdale. So as I say, Lechdale. This is Operation Bizz. And we can talk about John Howard. Let's find him, this guy here. So John Howard is a very interesting character. He was born in Camden in London. And if I can find... So he's yeah, he was born in Camden in London. He was the eldest of 9 children, I believe, and he was born in 1912. He went to work in the City of London as a clerk early on, and then a few years later, the company that he was working for went bust in the consequences of the Great Depression. He moved then to Shrewsbury in 1932, and he joined up with the King's Shropshire Light Infantry, where he served for, I believe, around about 7-8 years, and was promoted, I think, to corporal in that time. You know, nothing super impressive. He left but he had definitely got ambitions in the army. He applied to be an officer, but was rejected at the time. He left in 1938, and he moved on. He moved down to Oxford, and he joined the police in 1938. So 1939, then he is recalled back to his unit, and he rejoins the King's Shropshire Light Infantry as a corporal. But he's really rapidly promoted. This is when the whole army is obviously expanding, and he's promoted to company sergeant major within about 5 months, and then and he becomes a regimental sergeant major. At this point, he's in around 1940. He's obviously proven his worth. He's offered a commission. which he takes on, and the rule in the British Army is that a sergeant major doesn't serve as an officer in his regiment, for obvious reasons, because they're usually too close to the troops. So he's moved then as a second lieutenant to the the 2nd Battalion of the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry. He again is rapidly promoted within that organisation. He takes over a company and proves his mettle very quickly, and he then part of the Oxford and Bucks, the 2nd Battalion, becomes part of the Airborne. This is when it comes under Windy Gale's charge, and he actually accepts a demotion to a 2nd Lieutenant again, and he's put in charge of a platoon. But he gets promoted, and then eventually takes command of D Company of the 2nd Battalion. So you can really tell from just those stories, he's the eldest of 9, he's worked as a clerk, he's been a police officer, he's been a corporal, he's been a sergeant, he's obviously excelled at whatever he's done. And you can tell the kind of guy, he's a stickler, he likes things done right, he's that clerk kind of police officer vibe about him. And he obviously gets he's moved around different companies, different platoons, bringing them all into shape. He's driven. I believe he says is in his diary that the other officers look down on him. They're all kind of blue-blooded commissioned officers, and at this time of the war, being promoted up through the ranks, you're not one of ours, So he always feels that he's got to prove himself for it. He when Operation Bizz happened, you've got this was a major operation. Let me just talk about Operation Bizz. It was originally an exercise campaign that actually had elements of the US in it, but what happened was in this operation, he was originally tasked with capturing 3 bridges, but it's then scaled down to 2. So part of the planning for Operation Tonga was that they needed to capture these 2 bridges, and they knew probably that the bridges were rigged to be blown up. And anybody in military, with any military knowledge, would know that if you lost this bridge or were threatened to lose these bridges, you would immediately blow them up. So dropping paratroopers around the area isn't quick enough. If you could see paratroopers dropping around you and knew that the bridges were threatened, it gives you time to blow them up. So they knew Major General Gale decided that these had to be captured in a coup de main operation. He turns to Brigadier Hugh Kindersley, of the Oxford Bucks, and he turns around and says that he recommends Howard's D Company to do this job. So we are heading south right now. Let's see how we're getting on. We're pretty near. We're heading south. We're coming up on the Salisbury Plain, and what happens is that Kindersley tells Howard that, okay, this is going to be D Company's job, and it is known at the time by people in the Ox and Bucks that this is known as a VC mission. Now you can read between the lines, a guy who's newly promoted up through the ranks, given one of the most important, you could say, missions on D-Day, but it's also probably deemed as one of the ones that things could probably go pretty badly pretty quickly. Now we are coming up on a place now. Called Brigmarston Farm. Now, in shortly after Operation Bizz, Howard is informed of his mission. And he is given a security clearance, which is a top secret security clearance, where basically he can see the plans for D-Day. To be given a clearance for this, it's known as bigot. So if you have this clearance, then you're known as bigoted. And what we are looking at here is this farmhouse. This is basically the 6th Airborne Division's D-Day planning house. To enter this building, you had to have the bigot clearance, and you were known as bigoted. And I believe it's this place here. This is Salisbury Plain. The village here is Durrington, and this is where Howard came to plan. This was known by the troops as the Madhouse. It was codenamed Broadmoor. Now, I don't know whether it was codenamed Broadmoor because it was known as the Madhouse, or it was known as the Madhouse because it was codenamed Broadmoor, but it's not to be confused, I believe, with the psychiatric hospital Broadmoor, which is in Berkshire. We're in Wiltshire here. This is where all the information, reconnaissance photographs, resistance information is poured into this place. And Howard would come here, he'd see his mission, and he'd see the maps, photographs, information. They had a sand table built. It was believed that if there was a broken window in any building around his mission area, then the model would reflect that within 24 hours. So this is Broadmoor, or Bridge Marston House. And if we follow this road here, we come to this collection of buildings here, which is Bulford Camp. Now this is a British Army base, still is, and this is where D Company was based. You can zoom in here, you can even see now, look at all these tank transporters, vehicles, military vehicles. So this is, Howard would make this trip across to Broadmoor to check his plans. Quite an interesting place. This is basically the British Army training area. You can see down here there is a number of firing ranges. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 firing ranges. Yeah, so you can also see over here, this is chalk downs. So these are tank and training areas on Salisbury Plain. I think this place is Tidsworth, I think. Anyway, you can see here, look at all the tank training areas crisscrossing the land. So this is where they would train, and they did train for D-Day. Somewhere in this area, I know he would have the bridges taped out, so they would all know the sort of dimensions, and anything that was on the table would be taped out on the ground, and they would practice using that. I believe possibly the New Zealanders may have been here. Okay, so this is Bulford Camp. Now let's land. think we should be somewhere over here. There we go. This looks like Boscombe Down. Slow this up. Yeah, we want to be. Let's land on the east-west runway. We'll put some flaps down. Again, we're way too high. But this is Boscombe Down. This is going to be a very long runway. There we go. So let's call this the end of part 2. There we go. So we'll call that the end of part 2, and I'll see you in part 1. 3. Okay, so welcome back. We're now part 3 of our discussion on Operation Tonga. We've just landed at Boscombe, and now I'm going to fly over and come to Exeter. So we're going to take off from there, and we'll fly back now it's near to Blandford. Bear with me a second. Right, so Blandford. Now, we are talking somewhere. There we are, Blandford Forum. Where's the best place to go? I think we're just going to fly to the, here. Okay, so what do we want to talk about here? Well, what I want to talk about is these bridges here, so we'll add them on. And we also want to talk about this place. Okay, well, let's go.
Exeter Tower, FOP Zulu Uniform Oscar 2717. Ready for west departure at runway 26.
Okay, let's just prepare the aircraft. Let's set a heading, runway heading. And we'll set an altitude. Yeah, something like that much. 2000-ish. Give it a bit of that. Okay, so let's get rid of this ATC as soon as we can. Okay, just get rid of that. Okay, so let's get in the air then. Take off the brake. A little bit of right rudder. Airspeed active. There we go. Okay, GPS is fine. Pull back power. So once Howard has been told his mission, he starts off with there's a series of operations called Operation Mush. Now I don't know where they happened. Probably near to Bulford. I don't actually know the actual place that it took place.
Exeter Tower, FOP Oscar 2717. Continue for west departure.
But what I do know is during those operations, they performed an attack on the bridge. It was one that was defended by, I think it was the Polish parachute battalion. There was they basically found out that they probably were firing on each other during this exercise. There was a lot of confusion, and one of the umpires told them that they had basically been shooting on themselves. So they learned from that experience to basically shout out the name of their unit. This mission is deemed really important, and Howard is given almost carte blanche for what he can do. He's given 2 more platoons to his company. He takes 2 from B Company, so he's now got a 6 platoon company. They're going to be divided into 6 gliders, and the gliders contain something in the region of 30 men each. He's given a contingency of sappers. I believe about 20 sappers are given to him, and so we've got 6 gliders of at least 30 people. So we're talking about 180 men. That mission that he's given, the mush, he's been told he can basically get whatever he likes within reason. He's told, if you want something, let us know. And he basically turns around to the planners and says, look, find me 2 bridges somewhere in Britain that are very similar to the outline of what we're going to be facing in France. And they come back to him with this. And this is Exeter. This is the Countess Weir Bridge in Exeter. And as you can see, you've got a canal on the left and a river on the right with 2 bridges. Somewhere on this bridge there's supposed to be a plaque. I'm not sure where that would be. They weren't dropped here by gliders. Glider landings are so dangerous that they didn't risk it. They were dropped basically here by a truck and told this is where they landed. So if you're talking strictly, this is Pegasus Bridge, then you would probably decide that these guys would be dropped probably where this building is, to give the same sort of thing. And then another, so 3 truckloads of guys would be dropped, say, on here to attack this bridge, and then another 3 would drop to here to attack this bridge. There's believed to be, I think one of the soldiers said that when they got back after the campaign, one of the local residents had sent them a bill for breaking his roof during this exercise. But this, I don't think it's got an actual name that was given to him. I think they conducted it over three days. Pretty close. I think in May time we're talking that this happened. So there we go. That is the Countess Weir Bridge. So this is a very important location in the D-Day planning. Now we are going to start to wind up this this broadcast. So the last thing I would want to talk about, let's talk about for a start the glider pilots. So and this is where we're heading at the moment. The operation was planned to be using 6 gliders. They were the Horsa gliders, they were known as, built by Airspeed, and they were piloted by 12 NCOs from C Squadron of the Glider Pilot Regiment. The Horsa has a wingspan of 88 feet, which is about 27 meters. It's about 20 meters long, which is about 67 feet, and has maximum payload of about 7,100 kilograms. So into one of these horses you can get 2 pilots and 28 troops. You can also get, if you wanted to, a mixture of jeeps, guns and trailers. I mean, they were based at RAF Tarrant, Rushton, and they would practice landing in tight spaces. They used, because a lot of the time they were landing at night, so they would use stopwatches, and they would actually train during the day using dark glasses, so that they could practice as if it was nighttime. Willie, I think it's Private Willie Parr, he says that some of the troops of the Oxen Bucks were given danger money if they would become passengers in these gliders, so they would allow 6 troops to join the glider. They'd get paid extra money, but it also, I suppose, it gave the glider pilots that sort of added edge. Also, it gave them the feeling of what it was like to have live cargo on board, because, you know, any changing in weight affects the gliders. So by May 1944, these glider pilots had carried out 54 training sorties, flying in all sorts of weather. And a sign of how respected they were as pilots, they would actually carry with them on D-Day orders direct from Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, which was basically say that these guys, once they've done their job, were to make their way back to the beaches, and the orders that they were given were basically get these guys back to the UK as quickly as possible. So they were pretty well trained, pretty specialist troops that they did not want to waste being an infantry guy on the front. Right, so as we approach, we'll approach Tarrant Rushton, and we'll leave it there. If you have any questions, then please let me know. So Tarrant Rushton is going to be the place where the D Company is sent to. They get locked in, I suppose is the word. They get sealed into their camp, and it's these airborne troops are the ones where Eisenhower has to keep in mind when he makes his decision to go with D-Day. It's relatively easy to call back ships. It's less so to call back aircraft. So a decision had to be made before anybody took off. D Company taking off probably around about 11 o'clock in the night on the before D-Day. Were one of the first. There were Pathfinders who were going in, but as an actual major assault, they were the first that would be going down onto the battlefield. Now, just a little heads up then, I don't know if this is going to work, we'll see. If you want to help with these chats, let's just call them what they are, little chats, then you can come over to Discord. You'll find there all the things I will be talking about coming up, the different sections and notes that I've made. If you think there's any information you can add, then go to the forum pages and you can just add it down at the bottom. This, for example, is the D-Day one, and as you'll see, usually what happens is at the top there'll be a timeline, and you'll be able to click on the time, and it will go to whatever. So this one is entitled D Company Seal into Tarrant Rushton, Dorset, England, and so I've got information and research that I've been making. So for example, as you can see, they were given fatless meals to reduce air sickness. which is an interesting insight. They would be towed by Halifax bombers, and when we get into the flight, which will start next week with the actual mission taking off from Tarrant, Rushton. Yeah, this is information here. Like, you know, they're all painted in the D-Day stripes, you know, so that they wouldn't be shot down by their own ships and air force. The gliders were slotted basically into a bombing raid, so that they, you know, wouldn't they wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb. So we're going to be doing a lot of the route that they're going to take and the possible release point that they're given, and we'll see all that next week. So yeah, come along. You can see the link for Discord in the profile, in my profile on YouTube, and that will be really helpful if you can add a bit of information into anything here that you see. So if you want to go back to the timeline, you can see there different bits and bobs. On the left here as well, you'll see the different subjects that I'm going to be talking about. There are a series of videos that I want to do. So there'll be subjects on the Falklands War, Vietnam, Second World War, D-Day. We're going to be looking at North Africa, Burma. They're all listed down here. You can come along and find your favourite subject. Even things like football, cricket. You can come down. There's a whole series of stuff on each, like here, football clubs or whatever. And you can add information to it. One thing you can't do is actually add your own subject. You can only add what I want to do. But it means that when I get to that section, we will have I will shout you out on the stream. This is some work I'm doing on Normandy. So this section on Operation Tonga is part of the D-Day section, which is just concentrating on the sort of first 24 hours. And then the Normandy campaign will then be going from June the 6th all the way up to the liberation of Paris on August the 25th. Okay, so that is Discord. I hope you all appreciate this. It's all going on live, by the way. We are almost where we got to be. I didn't want to do any skipping, fast forwarding. I don't mind sort of going somewhere, taking off, coming back and land, and then moving somewhere else. But I wanted to get a lot of the time. I wanted to have that appreciation of the distances involved. So when we get so this is obviously has been a bit of a higgledy-piggledy kind of thing. Trying to keep it chronological. Then next week we're actually going to be going straight into the actual thing. We'll be flying the same route as them, We'll be looking at the ground specifically, and we'll be looking at D-Day hour by hour all the way through. But by doing it real, you get a good sense of the distances. So I wanted it to be something that if we're looking at battlefields or anything like that, we had to make sure that we were actually really seeing and feeling the distances and times of those operations. We can see Portland Bill over on the horizon. We're looking at Dorset. So I hope that has been something that you can quite enjoy. I know that it's all a bit disjointed, making sure that I'm doing a lot of the sort of talking from the top of my head, though it's good to have some help with some notes here and there. If you do go to the Discord page, you'll be able to see also there's recommended reading that you can look at. All the different books that I've read over the years on the different subjects. Again, if you have anything then to add to these, then please just add them onto it. What I will be doing is I'll be alternating talking on YouTube and Twitch. Twitch, I will tend to do a more of a sort of the flying side of things. Try to sort of keep more on the gaming kind of side of things, and on YouTube it would be more of the history. And so each week there will be one Twitch and there'll be one YouTube stream. And because Twitch doesn't keep the streams, and they are loaded up onto Spotify if you want to hear back on that. Right, we must be close now. Not quite. I tell you what I'll do. Let's use the camera. Let's head forwards. Beautiful part of the country, Dorset. This is Milton Abbas, I believe, just as a sort of side note. Very famous street. Well, famous because all of these ones are actually thatched cottages built because this here, which I believe is now a school, but it was an abbey, created this salmon lake and flooded the village, and I believe they then the owner built the village up this hill instead. Anyway, that's a side fact. Which means we're getting near to Blandford. Which is here, I think. And we're looking for Tarrant, Rushton. So this, I think, is Blandford Forum. And here. It's no longer used anymore. It's a disused airfield, but this is RAF Rushton. Tarrant, Rushton, sorry. You can see the outline of the runway. There was probably 3, usually, to make sure that there's always one that they can use into the wind. There's definitely one there. Probably another one on this axis here. But this is RAF Tarrant Rushton. So this is the airfield the D Company took off from. There's probably some buildings here or something. You can. It's an amazing detail when you're using the satellite imagery. You can really make out outlines of old buildings. So this is where we will start off next week when we fly over there. You can see in the distance here, this is Poole Harbour. We have Bournemouth. You can just see the Isle of Wight. And Normandy is over in that direction. So I'd like to thank you for watching, and I will see you all next week.